Welcome to another episode in the CMS Beginner Training Series. This video is tailored for programs in the Youth Workforce Development and Youth Workforce Development Justice-Involved Direct Service Strategies. All programs in these two strategies are required to provide work-based learning opportunities, or placements, for the youth they are serving. This video will walk you through how to enter a new placement and retention form and then come back when the placement is done and properly complete the form so that your program receives credit for the work it's doing. Please note that all youth in your program are expected to receive at least 20 hours of group or individual activity in addition to the placement. Please watch the videos on setting up group activities, enrolling youth, and taking attendance to learn how to properly record the job training and other activities you are offering your youth. The work-based learning opportunity placements are recorded for each youth separately. This means that before you can enter a placement for a youth, you must first enter the youth into the system. Please watch the video on creating participant and staff records if you don't know how to do this. Now, assuming the youth already has a record in the system, we must navigate to the youth's record to actually add the placement. In this example, let's say we have a youth named Matt Kane and that we want to place him at a job. We are starting at the home screen for our sample program. Now, to find Matt, we first need to click on the Participants and Staff tab on the left navigation menu, like this. This takes us to the Child and Youth and Staff page. From here, you can add a new record into the CMS, or you can find an existing record. We want to add a placement to Matt's existing record, so first we have to find it. The CMS presents several ways to find an existing youth record. We can search by first and/or last name by typing it in the boxes on the right here. This would be the fastest way if you know the name and serve a lot of participants. Or we can view a complete list of all child and youth participants entered into the system by clicking on the View Child and Youth option here. This is a good way if you don't serve too many youth at your program. The last option is to go straight to view a list of all the records in the system by last name initial by clicking on the letters down here. We're looking for Matt Kane, so I'm going to click on C. Once you find the record, you simply need to click on the name like this. This takes you to the youth's registration page. It's a good idea to take this chance to review the data entered for the youth and make sure that all the required fields with the red stars have been completed. If you are missing any of those fields, you will not get credit for the youth. Now, to add a placement and retention form, you must click on the yellow Employment tab at the top, like this. This takes you to a list of all the placement and retention forms recorded for the youth. If you believe there are some past placement forms that are not showing up, you can click on the drop-down menu at the top right here to select the option to see all the forms, not just those in the current term. If you have any questions about what a current service term is, please watch the video on how to set your service term under the extra video section. In our sample case, this will be the first placement form for Matt, so there's nothing listed. To add the form, simply click on the Add button here, like this. This takes you to the placement and retention form. There are 12 questions in the form, and you're required to complete 8 questions when you first enter the form. Each question has the red star. The form will not let you save unless all 8 questions are properly completed. Now, remember, you're expected to come back to this very form and complete the final 4 questions from 9 to 12 when the youth placement at the work-based learning opportunity has ended, or your support of the youth at this placement has ended. Let's go over the questions in the form one at a time. First, you are asked to select a fiscal year. The fiscal year for DCYF runs from July 1st to June 30th. You need to make sure you attach this form to the correct fiscal year so that it counts toward the appropriate year-end performance measure. The choices you'll have will change depending on what time of the year you are creating this placement and retention form. At some points in the year, you will not have the option to select a fiscal year. It'll be pre-selected for you. Right now, because I'm creating this form in the middle of the fiscal year, it is already selected to FY 13-14. However, if I was creating a form around the time that a fiscal year was changing, around June or July, I would have to select the correct fiscal year between FY 13-14 or the next fiscal year. If you're unsure which fiscal year to attach the placement and retention form to, please be sure to ask your supervisor or contact DCYF for further clarification. Now once the fiscal year is selected, you'll be prompted next to select the funding source you want to attach the form to. This represents the program that the youth is participating in. For this sample program, there was only one choice. Now some agencies are funded to provide multiple programs, so they need to make sure that they are selecting the appropriate funding source so that the placement is counted under the right program. If you have any doubts, ask your supervisor or contact your program officer at DCYF. After you select the funding source, you must select the service site and cycle that the placement falls under. In each cycle of your job program, a youth should be receiving at least 20 hours of activity and one placement. The purpose of this field is to let us know what cycle the placement should be counted under. One thing to note is that the program site identified is not necessarily the job site the youth is placed at, but rather it's the program site where the youth receives the training and support your program provides. If your program will be operating for more than one cycle at a specific site, you will see that site listed more than once. And next to the site, you will see the name for the different cycles. Please be sure that you are selecting the cycle during which this placement will occur. In this example, we can see our site International Studies Academy has two cycles, one for school and one for summer. These service sites and cycles pull directly from your work plan. If you don't see the service site or cycle that you're looking for, or something looks incorrect, it's possible that it was not entered into the services and projections form of your work plan properly, and I would review that form to make sure that all sites and cycles are accounted for. For this example, we're placing Matt at the International Studies Academy site, and he is a participant of our school year cycle, not our summer cycle, so I will go ahead and select school. Next, we categorize the work-based learning opportunity as either a paid or unpaid work experience, a paid or unpaid internship, or a job shadow. For more details on the definitions of each of these opportunities, please click on the resources provided below in the video description. For this example, I'll select Work Experience Paid. Now because this is a paid work experience, I'll be prompted to answer a few additional questions about how much the youth is being paid and the source of those wages. But first, we must identify the start date for this job experience. This will be the first day that the youth starts at this placement. For this example, I'll say Matt is starting a job on January 13th. Next, I need to identify the expected end date for the experience. This is the date when I expect the youth to end his participation with this work-based learning opportunity. This date is important because after this date, I'll be expected to return to this form and enter the result of the placement. This is when I'll need to come back and complete the final 4 questions of the form. Now there are some programs that may place youth at a work-based learning opportunity that has no end date. In these cases, we suggest that you identify the date when the youth will no longer be receiving intensive or even partial support or participating in your training and support activities. If you're unsure as to how this applies to your program, please ask your supervisor or contact your program's program officer here at DCYF, or send an email to the support email provided below, and we'll work with you to identify the best way to enter the expected end date. For this example, I will say that Matt Kane is expected to end his time at this job on May 30th. Next, you must enter the hourly wage or stipend amount that the youth will be receiving for this job. If the youth is receiving the city's minimum wage, you simply need to check this box like this. At the time of the video, the minimum wage was $10.74 an hour. Remember, you're not allowed to pay a youth an hourly rate below the minimum wage. If the youth is making more than the minimum wage, please enter the wage in the box below. Do not use a $sign when entering the wage amount. Simply enter the wage as a number greater than $10.74. If the youth is not receiving an hourly wage but a stipend, you could enter the stipend at the box below here. Be sure to enter the stipend at an integer greater than 0. If the work-based learning experience is paid, you must identify if the wages are subsidized or unsubsidized. Now the way to think about this is that wages are subsidized if any portion of them are supported by this DCYF grant, other public funding, or even foundation funding. The wages are unsubsidized if they are being paid completely by an outside employer. For example, if you place the youth at a job at Macy's, this would be unsubsidized. In our example, we'll identify it as subsidized. The next question identifies how many hours a week, on average, the youth will be participating at the work-based learning experience. We understand that the weekly hours will fluctuate from week to week, but please provide your best estimate. In our example, we'll say we know Matt will work 20 hours one week, but usually about 10 hours the next week. So that would be an average of 15 hours per week. The last question that we complete when entering the form is categorizing what type of work-based experience the youth is placed at. There are 4 options. The first is public and government. You'll select this if the placement is at a city department or another government agency. The next option is private nonprofit. You would select this if the placement is at an after-school or teen program or any other nonprofit that is not run by or affiliated with your organization or agency. The next choice is private for profit. If the youth is working at a retail store or at a bank not related to your program, then select this. Lastly, if you're placing the youth at a paid or unpaid experience somewhere under your organization or agency, then you'll identify this as an in-house placement. Select this option even if the youth is placed at a program your agency runs that is not funded by this particular Youth Workforce Development Grant. In our example, we'll select in-house placement. Now that we've completed the 8 starred questions, we can now save the placement and retention form. To do this, you go to the top of the form and click Save and Return. This will take you back to the list of placements if the form was completed correctly. However, if you missed any of the fields or entered an invalid answer for one of the questions, the form will not let you save and will list what needs to be fixed at the top. You see here, it's telling me that I did something wrong with question 5. So if we go down to question 5, you see that I accidentally checked off minimum wage and also entered an hourly wage. So I can fix this by unchecking the minimum wage. Now I can try and save and return the form again. However, I must be sure to select the funding source and the service cycle once more time because it automatically reset. Now that everything looks fixed, I click on the Save and Return button like this, and you see it takes me back to the employment page where I now see the form I just completed listed here. Now you're done with the first part of entering a placement, but there is still more you'll have to do. In our example, we set the expected end date as May 30th, 2014. So let's fast forward to May. Let's actually start back at the home screen here. Now, it's May, and Matt has successfully completed the work-based learning experience, and thanks to all that he's learned, he is moving on to greater things. So I need to go back to the form and complete the final 4 questions to report all of this good news. First, we need to find Matt's record again. We do this by going back to the participants and staff. This time, we'll search for Matt here by typing in his first name. And we can click on his name here to get back to his registration page. Now that we're back at the registration form, we can go back up to the Employment tab by clicking here like this. Here we find the form we entered all the way back in January. We can click Edit on the form to complete the last 4 questions and report how the experience went. This takes us back to the form. Now, if for some reason Matt is extending his time at the same placement, you can just go in and change the expected end date to reflect the new date that you'll think Matt will end his time at the job. Just go ahead and change the date here at question 4 and save the form again at the top of the page. But if Matt has actually completed the experience, you must go in and answer the last 4 questions of the form. We'll start here at question 9. Here we enter the actual date that Matt ended his experience. Let's say in our example, he ended it 2 weeks earlier than he expected, back on May 14th. Next, we need to identify the reason for ending the experience. This is very important because it helps us understand whether youth are completing placements or if they are leaving for other reasons. There are 6 options, so let's go over each one. You select the first option if the youth successfully completed the placement. The second option is if the participant is completed participation with your program, but the placement is actually continuing beyond the program. Now, I would select this option if Matt was placed at a job that he was going to stay at for an indefinite period of time, even after our program has stopped supporting and training him. The next option is self-terminated due to personal reasons. I would select this if Matt ended his participation in the experience because of personal issues that were not related to the experience itself, such as moving or other responsibilities coming up. The next option captures if Matt elected to end the experience because he didn't like the job or did not feel it was meeting his needs. This would be self-terminated due to program issues. The fifth choice is terminated by program. I would select this if either we or the place he was employed at ended Matt's participation with the placement because he did not show up or did not meet other expectations. The last option is attained another job. I would choose this if Matt ended the experience early because he left to start a job that he secured independently from our program. In our example case, Matt completed the program, so I will select the first option. The next 2 questions will help DCYF understand how many hours in total Matt was at the job. Currently, the CMS has no way to track the hours a youth spends at his work experience, so we ask programs to do their best to help us do this when the placement ends. You simply need to enter a good estimate for the total hours that the youth was at the work-based experience. Now, some programs can look back at payroll and see exactly how many hours the youth worked, while other programs may have to estimate the total hours in other ways. We know that some programs do not separate the hours the youth are at the placement from the hours the youth are being trained. We ask that you indicate if the total hours you enter in question 11 does or does not include the hours you have recorded in the CMS activities. For example, if I know Matt has participated in 250 total hours, and that those hours include both his time at the job and the hours spent at our trainings that we tracked in the CMS group activities, then I would put in 250 for question 11 and answer yes for question 12. If, on the other hand, I know that Matt participated in 250 hours at his placement only, and that he participated in 40 hours of additional training that we recorded on the CMS, then I would just enter 250 hours for question 11 and answer no for question 12. For this example, let's say that we know exactly he spent 250 hours just at the placement, so I'll answer no for question 12. This is the last question on the form, and if you complete all 4 questions, you'll be able to save the completed form by going to the top and clicking Save and Return. If you did not complete all 4 questions at the bottom of the form, it will not allow you to save any of the data in the last 4 questions. So that's how you correctly complete a placement and retention form. A few last things about entering placement and retention forms in general before you go. If a youth participates in more than one cycle in a fiscal year, that youth may receive more than one placement in the same year. However, please note the youth will only count once toward your year-end performance measures. Another thing to note is that if a youth is carried over from a prior year, DCYF expects that the youth will receive not just a new placement in this second year, but will also receive the minimum of 20 hours of job training activity in the second year as well. Now, thank you for taking the time to learn how to properly record a youth's work-based learning opportunity placement. Please see the links to additional resources in the video description box below, and be sure to watch other helpful CMS beginner training videos. Thank you.